Would it be fair to say that Malawians are citizens, meaning they owe allegiance to the state, and therefore they have constitutional rights, inalienable rights, in fact, birthrights, and therefore they employ the president or the public officials rather than the other way around? Or are they in fact subjects, owing allegiance to an individual authority with no constitutional rights, except that they may in fact in the end be granted with privileges by that particular individual authority?
You see, citizens, yes. Obligated by the Constitution, yes, and there are rights in there. And what we see today is what I was describing earlier on, that we, over time, have created a slave-master relationship. So yes, they'll put presidents, look, it's not just, we shouldn't be obsessed with the presidency. I think it's members of parliament and also councillors. These are appointed, voted into office, in essence elected into office, or hired or employed by the citizens, the people of Malawi. And again, it's not everybody. Maybe as you descend down the strata from presidency to members of parliament to councillors, you begin to get different approaches from different individuals. There are certain members of parliament that would be great, I mean, with their constituents. But what we are up against is that the people should be subjects, and this is why I'm saying we need to change the type of politics. Who changes it? It is the one who occupies the office. To begin to say, some of these attachments are not necessary. These frills that surround this office are not necessary. We shouldn't be subsumed into saying, oh, by the way, this is the way things have been done in the last 54 years. We should begin to look at, the style of doing things differently. We should advocate for meaningful and genuine change in approach. And that's the advocacy that we bring today. We should have leaders that can first and foremost check themselves to say, when I was campaigning, I promised 1, 2, 3, 4 things. Is this exactly what it is? It's not promising development, but it's promising to change presidential powers, appointing powers of the president in hiring top civil servants, etc., etc. Why should that still be the case today, when back then we said we would be changing some of those provisions in the law to empower certain officers or certain agencies within the country to be responsible for hiring of civil servants. So that's just by one example. So yes, one would say, we promised we were going to build you a road and I was going to buy you a nice suit like you're wearing today. Yes. That's fine. But I should also say, what did I promise I would do sitting in this office so that the office becomes different?
Do you have the rule of law
here
in Malawi?
No, we do.
Is it ruled by law?
No, the rule of law is there. I think we are not bad.
What would you say is the single most important decision that you made during your vice presidency? And what about the single most regrettable decision during the same period?
I would put retention of staff in my office as a good thing, because the ones that I started with in 2014, I still have them today. The chemistry is good, and also that I have tried to motivate where I must, as we continue, we are still one unit, which is for me a big plus. Regrettable, none. I don't regret any decision that I made.
You've been very critical of the government and the president in terms of the handling of corruption, correct?
Yes.
And yet, You have actually been the number 2 man in that particular government. When, the question that I can ask you now is, what did you know about that type of corruption, and when did you know it?
Yes, you're right. I am critical of the way this is being handled. And over the years, I have spoken about it. And I'm continuing to do so. Maybe now, because we are, it's more prominent, because I'm standing on the side, it doesn't mean that I didn't speak about it before. I presented a paper, I delivered a public lecture at the University of Malawi. It was on moral decadence. This was at the launch of the ethics department, in ethics program in the Masters in Ethics at Chanza College. This was last year. I was highlighting the same things. I have condemned, when I am champion of the construction sector transparency initiative. When we had sessions, I have spoken against corruption in the construction industry. Working with my colleagues in that organization, we have we have blacklisted contractors that we thought were doing substandard jobs and therefore shortchanging the government. I mean, these are things that we have done. It's not as if I've just woken up all of a sudden and started preaching against it. We have condemned. And by the way, I mean, there's nobody who says there's no corruption in this country. Everybody agrees. I mean, that's why we commemorate, there is Anti-Corruption Day, there is the Bureau. The reason it is established is because we must fight that vice. But we need to do it a lot more emphatically, so that we set examples and we stop it.
Let's talk about the vision thing. What is your vision for Malawi?
We look at a country that should become middle income. And I would say that you want a citizen who has 3 meals a day.
I like that.
Has got a decent house to live in, and has, some either piece of land or some business, to earn a decent living and send their children to school.
That sounds like political utopia. You're describing pretty much what is the Netherlands, really. What
Sure.
is the Scandinavian countries and what have you.
Absolutely.
Governments which put the people or their people at the center.
Sure.
I like that.
And this is what we should strive to become.
How can you accomplish that? Where do you get the resources, the money from, for example?
And this is why we are fighting. We have to fight. You remember I said fundamentals first?
Yes.
Let's correct the politics. Let's root out corruption. Let's sort out these nepotistic tendencies. We'll find that there is enough for everybody. We collect enough resources, tax and non-tax revenue, to drive certain of our own programs. We do have collaborating partners that assist. It could be NGOs, international NGOs. It could be our donor partners. It could be the churches or religious organizations that have, participated in national development. Religious organizations have built schools. They have built hospitals. They have assisted orphanages. The complementary efforts by these other people should come on a sound base that the government itself is doing the right things. And I am saying, if we stopped the leakage, if we drained the swamp and we dealt with corruption,
You are reminding me of an American presidential candidate.
We would
about draining the swamp.
Absolutely. So we would surely achieve this, and then you can prescribe over what period. Because you remember I was talking about 5 kilometers from where we're sitting?
Right.
If there are settlements just outside this fence that do not fit the definition of a capital city, it should be the responsibility of government to provide decent accommodation to those people, because they are renting anyway. But what they're renting today is not decent enough. It's because they cannot afford. And we have seen this happening elsewhere. Ethiopia is a case in point. We've seen high-rise buildings, high-rise apartments where people are renting and with the possibility to own. But really, wishing for a fellow citizen to have 3 meals a day is not asking for the moon. I mean, it's basic human right, and this is what people should be entitled to.